I've always been interested in the nature of materials and working with my hands. There's just something much more interesting about the reality of three-dimensional objects to me. So I think that's why primarily most of my work is realized through sculpture. My work has really evolved from early pieces that were made out of permanent materials. But since that time, I've really branched out to play with materials that are much more temporary. So I really moved away from that idea of sculpture as everlasting and very solid in that sense to creating sculptural projects that have just impermanence and more fragility, I guess. Vignette was an exhibition at the Augsburg College. I chose 9 common houseplants and then covered each of the plants with gold leaf material. I was interested in this idea of kind of using these static little golden still lifes in a way that as you move through the space, the kind of visual intensity of that built, as the objects got larger and shinier and more gold, and then they faded away through that reflection. This exhibition, Postures Everything, is pretty directly developed from the treatment project that I did a couple years ago. I was given this small cabinet gallery to exhibit in. I decided that I would cover all of the wall surfaces, the ceilings, the windows, the radiators, so everything except the floor was painted with silicone rubber. One of the remarkable things about this material is that it cleanly removes off of any surface except itself. So it's designed to capture detail of whatever it's put on. So it comes in a liquid form, and I painted the whole space with 2 layers of this rubber. My interest in that project initially was to create a very definite, but in a way a very subtle change to the space. And I then had the great task of peeling all of that rubber off the walls. During that process, as I was peeling the silicone down, these sheets started to take on this really beautiful kind of theatrical draping quality. So I learned so much more even about the material as I was deinstalling the project, which was just an incredible bonus. I'm getting to take this space away from its, real location in rubber form, but also it was just so exciting to see how this material can act in other ways. What I learned from deinstalling that project really directly inspired this Postures Everything exhibition. Within the gallery space, the composition just kind of happens more intuitively. I feel a little bit like a painter once I get into the gallery, because then it's all of these decisions that you have to make about color and distance and space. I have kind of, general ideas in mind about how I envision the forms, of course, while I'm making the work off-site. But once I get into the gallery, I feel like I really have to put my composing hat on, and it happens pretty relevant to, how I see the space with the material and the scale of the objects that I bring along. I describe this piece in very general terms. My vision of it was a blue rubber mountainous landscape in a way, obviously in a very minimal and kind of abstracted form, but that's a kind of general tagline of how I describe the project. The more I work, the more inspiration and ideas get generated from that, but also for sure the more I learn about how an audience understands or sees the work is just as equally inspiring or encouraging, that it gives me that much more information to really help form and develop these new ideas.
Minnesota Original is made possible by the State Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund and the citizens of Minnesota.